All right, welcome to The Explainer. Right now, the Middle East is on a knife's edge, really at a tipping point. Today, we're going to unpack two crises that are unfolding at the exact same time. First, you've got this collapsed ceasefire between the US and Iran, which is already sparking military action. And at the same time, there's a super shaky truce on the Israel-Lebanon border. The real danger? These two situations could easily merge and pull the entire region into a massive conflict.
So let's get right to it. Why should you care about this? Well, it boils down to this number, 1/5. 1/5 of the entire world's oil supply is now at risk. It all centers on this one critical waterway, the Strait of Hormuz. Think of it like a global energy superhighway. After the US imposed a blockade, Iran's response was to just shut it down, completely. And this isn't some far-off regional problem. Its closure has basically put the entire global economy on high alert.
Okay, so how on earth did we get to a full-blown blockade in the first place? Well, it all goes back to the collapse of a very, very fragile 2-week ceasefire between the United States and Iran. It was a diplomatic effort that basically ran out of time before it even really began.
And just look at how fast this all fell apart. I mean, you've got a high-level U.S. delegation literally in the air on its way to Pakistan for peace talks when, bam, Iran just announces they're not coming. Just like that, the window for diplomacy slams shut, and this was hours before the ceasefire was even officially over.
And this really gets to the absolute heart of the problem. You had two sides with completely immovable positions. On one hand, the US was demanding control over Iran's enriched uranium stockpiles. For Iran, that was a total non-starter. I mean, they said transferring it was fundamentally not on the agenda. Then, on the other hand, Iran refused to even talk about its defensive missile program. They called it a red line. So you had both sides walking in with demands the other found absolutely impossible. There was just no room to negotiate.
So with the talks collapsing, President Trump's response was, well, let's just say it was blunt. He posted, "No more Mr. Nice Guy." He went on to threaten Iran's infrastructure and really double down on his conviction that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. It was a clear signal that the time for talking was pretty much over.
And that diplomatic failure? It didn't stay diplomatic for long. It almost immediately spilled over into military action in one of the most important shipping lanes on the planet. This is where the talks stopped and the action began.
And things escalated fast. It all culminated in this really dramatic seizure of an Iranian ship, the MV Touska. Okay, so get this. First, there's a 6-hour standoff with a US destroyer. Then the US warship fires warning shots from its main gun, successfully disabling the ship's engine room. And finally, US Marines fast roped down from a helicopter to board and seize the vessel. The US believed it was carrying dual-use military components.
So how did Iran respond? Swiftly and decisively. They saw the US seizing their ship and enforcing a blockade, and their reaction was to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. For everybody, this created an insane logjam. We're talking hundreds of tankers stranded. Insurance for any ship trying to go through there? Forget about it, it's become unobtainable. Meanwhile, Iran is calling this armed piracy and vowing retaliation.
And this quote from a ship captain who's actually there, wow. Captain Rahman al-Jabori said it's like sailing over a ball of fire. I mean, that just perfectly captures the extreme danger in the chaos right now. You're not just worried about getting through, you're worried about sea mines, military confrontation. It's become one of the most dangerous stretches of water on the planet.
Okay, but that's not all that's happening. While all of this is exploding with Iran, a second parallel crisis is simmering on Israel's northern border with Lebanon. Now, there's a fragile truce in place, but it's being completely overshadowed by reports of widespread destruction. It's creating a whole other flashpoint, turning the region into a tinderbox.
So on the one hand, you do have a small glimmer of hope. There's a 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon that is, for now, holding. And there are actually high-level peace talks scheduled for this Thursday in Washington, D.C. So diplomacy isn't completely dead here.
But on the other hand, the reality on the ground tells a very different story. While the truce has been in effect, a staggering 39 villages in the south have reportedly been destroyed. It's this stark, grim contrast, diplomats talking in Washington while homes and communities are being leveled. And a huge point of conflict in these talks is this so-called buffer zone. Basically, Israel says it will not pull its forces out of a 10-kilometer strip of land inside Lebanon. Their reasoning is that they need to clear out Hezbollah infrastructure. But for Lebanon, this is a clear violation of their sovereignty. This is the real sticking point, and it just shows you the deep, deep mistrust that makes any kind of lasting peace so incredibly difficult.
All right, let's zoom out a bit, because these two conflicts aren't happening in a vacuum.
They're sending very real shockwaves through the entire global economy, shaking up international markets.
And you can see the reaction right here. It was immediate. Fears of a bigger war sent oil prices soaring. Brent crude jumped over 6%. At the same time, you saw major stock indexes like the S&P 500 and NASDAQ dip as investors got pretty nervous about all this instability.
And inside Iran itself, the economic damage is just staggering. Their government puts the cost of war damages at $270 billion. That's an astronomical number. We're talking about their critical steel and petrochemical industries being absolutely gutted, making any kind of recovery incredibly difficult.
And as you can imagine, the rest of the world is completely divided on what to do next. You got major players like China and Saudi Arabia who are basically saying the Strait of Hormuz must remain open, period. Then you have France and Germany trying to pump the brakes, pushing for de-escalation to protect the global economy. And then even within the region, you've got this big split. The UAE and Bahrain are saying let's defang Iran and reopen the strait by force, while Oman and Qatar on the other side pushing hard for immediate diplomacy.
So let's just quickly recap the key takeaways here. You've got two major Middle East crises blowing up at the same time. The failure of US-Iran diplomacy has led to a direct military standoff. A vital global oil artery is now totally shut down. At the same time, the Israel-Lebanon truce is hanging by a thread. And all of this is putting massive strain on global markets and on international alliances.
Which, of course, leaves us with the one massive question looming over everything. With diplomacy failing and military action escalating, is a wider war now simply inevitable? That's what the entire world is watching to find out.